Hi, my name is Bandy, and this is my channel, Bandysbooks. Today, me and Gibson are here to do a October wrap-up. I did do a mid-month video with an update on a lot of the books I had read, where I kind of gave you a summary and a review of what I had read that far into the month. I have not been as productive in the second half of the month, so I've only added a few more books to the list. I am not going to go into all of those books in detail. So if you want more of a detailed review of the vast majority of the books I read this month, then you can check out this video. There's going to be a link that's going to appear right here in the screen. Click on that, it'll take you over to all of that lovely feedback that I had on those books. So that being said, let's get into some statistics, some breakdowns, some ratings, and things like that. So in the month of October, I decided that I was going to focus solely on like spooky vibe kind of books. So anything that falls into the psychological thriller, dark mystery, gothic horror, graphic horror, suspense, those kind of historical, like dark historical fictions, things like that. Those sort of books were my focus for October. I really do love a good psychological thriller, so I have read plenty of those in the past. But I'm not super big on like the horror genre. I hadn't really read much gothic horror, and I definitely hadn't read much graphic horror either. So I decided that this month I was going to kind of push out of my comfort zone just a little bit and explore more of the horror genre. And I was pleasantly surprised. I had expected to not really be that excited, and I ended up reading a handful of books that I felt were really good and kind of gave me a new light in terms of the horror genre. I think I still read more psychological thrillers than anything. I think if I remember correctly, there was 5 or 6 books that fell into that category. There's 3 gothic horror, 1 graphic horror, and a handful of other books that fall into like historical fiction, suspense, that sort of a genre. There's going to be a nice pie chart that pops up right over here that will kind of give you an image of those numbers and how they break down and everything. But yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed pushing out of my comfort zone, especially the gothic horror. I found that for me, that had a very similar vibe to like a psychological thriller, because it had like a slower build up. There's like this eeriness that creeps in on at least in the case of all 3 of the gothic horror books that I read. This eeriness creeps in and things are wrong, but you don't necessarily get all of what's wrong initially, and it kind of builds and builds and builds. So for me, that actually works really well. So I will definitely be returning to the gothic horror genre in the future. Now for graphic horror, I didn't love that as much. The book that I read that was graphic horror, I think was very well written. The description was really good. The story itself made a lot of sense. I'm just personally not really into like super bloody, gory description, and this book was very violent and very gory and bloody. And so it just really wasn't my cup of tea. It's not a criticism of that book in particular, nor of that author, because like I said, I think it was well done. It's just not my preference, I think. And may, next year when it comes to Halloween again, give another graphic horror novel a try. But at this time, I'm just, it's not my thing. The thrillers, the historical fiction, all that kind of stuff, I really enjoy. So that was no surprise there. So one thing that I was really pleased about this month was my average star rating. I found this a pretty solid month. I didn't have anything that was like mind-blowing, but I also didn't have anything that was horrible. I had no DNFs, which is always a pleasant thing. My breakdown of my 16 books fell into 4 stars and 3 stars basically. So there will be a little graph that pops up like right in this area here to kind of give you an idea of how I rated most of my books. In general, for me, the way that I rate a book is that 5 stars is like a mind-blowing, life-changing kind of a book, one that I'll actually go back and reread. A 4-star book is really solid, something I'm super happy about, and it's even something that I'll buy myself a nice hardcover copy of and put on my bookshelves permanently. But maybe there's like some little things that I wish would have been changed, or maybe the pacing was off in places, things like that. Something that isn't like completely detrimental to the story, but it's not perfect. 3 stars is like, this was fine enough. I enjoyed it. If I have a copy of a 3-star book and I read it and I'm done with it, then I'll actually go donate it to a little free library or give it to someone else. I don't I have a rule in my house that I don't keep copies of 3-star books because I'm not going to reread them again. I didn't love them. They were just, they were fine. Like, they were adequate reads. I'm not mad at having read them. Enjoyable enough, but, something about them just, for me, didn't quite vibe the right way. 2 stars would be a book that I really, really did not like. I felt like there was massive problems. I didn't vibe with the book. I didn't like the subject matter, the characters, something, there's something severely wrong, in my opinion, with that book. And a 1 star, the only reason I'll ever give a book a 1 star is if I DNF it. I very, very rarely DNF a book. So if I do DNF, it has to have some pretty severe flaws. Usually I will try to read a book 2 to 3 times before I'll DNF it. Because I've actually found with some books that, like, hey, I started it, I didn't really like it, I took a break, and then when I was in a different headspace, I came back and it turned out to be a pretty decent book. So, like I said, when I get to a 1 star review, it's been a process before we've gotten there. So like I said, this month was great. All 4 stars and 3 stars, all solid books. I am not highly critical of any single one. I will say that I was disappointed that a couple of the 3 stars ended up being 3 stars because they were super, super hyped up, and I had thought that they might be 5 stars. Old Gibson. Okay, so I know that just looking at a pie chart or a bar graph with numbers doesn't really give you an idea of what I ranked each book. So let's talk about the 3-star reviews first. They're going to pop up, the covers of the books are going to pop up over here somewhere. So my 3-star reviews were The Silent Patient and The Maidens, both by Alex Michaelides, Sorrowland by River Solomon, The Monster of Ellenhaven by Jennifer Greisbach, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I felt, for various reasons, that all of these books belonged in the 3-star category. Like I said, there's no hate. I didn't dislike any of them. I think all of them were interesting enough to warrant reading them yourselves. But I found that most of them had issues with timing. A big thing for me was feeling like stories dragged on for way too long and then rushed through the ending. I definitely felt that way about The Silent Patient, The Maidens, and Sorrowland. With Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, I just felt like it was too long. It dragged on and on and on. The character is supposed to be, 500 years old or something, and it felt like the book took 500 years. I thought the concept was super interesting. I just could have done with half the size. For The Lost Apothecary, I really loved one timeline. I didn't love the other timeline nearly as much. And just generally, like I said, it was like pacing, timing, not loving all the characters or all the timelines, but nothing catastrophic. Again, all of them have interesting concepts and are worth a read. Alright, so we're going to talk now about the 10 books that I rated in the 4-star category. Again, we'll have covers popping up over here, so you can jot them down if you like. The books that I rated for 4 stars were Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell, When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen, and I have my notes here. The Push by Ashley Audrain, The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon, and My Sweet Girl by Amanda Giatissa, The Tattooist of Auschwitz, Billy Summers by Stephen King, The Quiet Girl by S.F. Cosa, Gods of Jade and Shadow, and Mexican Gothic, both by Silvia Moreno Garcia. So all of those books were in the 4-star category. For me, they were all really, really good, really suspenseful. I would say probably in terms of the most psychologically thrilling, Then She Was Gone, The Push, and My Sweet Girl were really psychological experiences. They left me guessing pretty much up until the end. In all 3 of them, I did start to figure out the plot towards the end, or the twist in the plot towards the end, but I didn't have it all the way figured out. There were still details that were a little bit of a mystery for me. I would say that probably the Tattooist of Auschwitz for me, that was not really horror, it was historical fiction, but I mean, what could be more horrific than the Holocaust? For me, that was a really beautiful story because it, deals with the worst of humanity, but shows us how love and kindness can overcome some of the worst of humanity and how people can help each other survive. So I really enjoyed that one for that. I would say that both Mexican Gothic and Gods of Jade and Shadow were 2 of my favorites. different reasons actually. Gods of Jade and Shadow was very like adventure-y, mystical. I got to see a lot of different parts of Mexico through the story and learn a lot about Mayan religion and spirituality. Mexican Gothic for me was that perfect balance of like creepy Gothic vibe, an ambiguous ending. Just, I really liked it. When the reckoning comes, the detail was superb. There was a few things that I felt like stayed as loose ends at the end of the story, but I kind of liked that. It just, in general, like I said, all of these books were pretty strong. Maybe some minor changes that could have been made, but overall, really, really solid books. I would highly recommend any of these 10. If you're looking for something to freak you out, spooky, something that's good for a dark, rainy fall evening, any of these 10 books would be well deserving of a place on your list. And finally, a few little statistics just to kind of round everything out. In total, this month for pages, I read 5,464 pages. That's a pretty good number. I'm excited about that. Most of the books that I read averaged between 300 to 400 pages. There were a couple that went above or below that. So the longest book that I read this month was Billy Summers. That was at 515 pages. If you're familiar with Stephen King's works at all, you know that he likes to write hefty, hefty books. This one was no different. And the shortest book I read was Monster of Elendhaven. It was 160 pages, and it was a novella format. For me, I'm kind of glad that one was 160 pages because it was the graphic horror. It was the one that was really brutal and violent. So for me, if it had gone any longer, it would have been probably really much harder for me to get through. And finally, let's talk about my favorite and my least favorite. So I'm going to start with the least favorite first. My least favorite was a book that's so hyped up. I see it everywhere and everybody raves about it, and I'm so happy for the people that love it. Don't take this as a criticism. If you love this book, it's not criticism of you. If you're really excited about reading it, don't let me discourage you from it. It just wasn't my vibe, and that was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. For me, this book was glacially slow. It was a struggle at points to get through it. I think the overall concept of the book is super interesting. I loved the concept of the deal with the devil, nobody being able to remember her. I thought lots of plot points throughout the story were very interesting and good, and there were certainly parts of the story that were really well done. It's just there was so much filler in between that I found myself struggling about getting from like one interesting point to the next. I think I've mentioned several times over now, if it had been half the length, I think it would have been a 4-star review for me. But because it dragged on so long, unfortunately, it was my least favorite read of the month. My favorite read of the month, there's two that tied. The one that I liked, probably in the psychological thriller / horror genre the most, was The Push by Ashley Audrain. For me, this was a surprise. I read the description of this book not expecting to like it that much. I am not a mom. I have no interest in being a mom. I don't really consider myself to be somebody that has like a super strong maternal instinct. So reading a book about a woman struggling with motherhood and struggling with her pregnancy and struggling with her child post-pregnancy and being able to relate to it so deeply was very surprising for me. It was really well done. I kind of saw where the plot twist was going towards the end of the book. I thought it could go one of two ways, and it ended up going one of the ways that I predicted, but even still, it didn't lessen the value of the ending. I found it really creepy, and I just thought it was really, really well written. Probably my favorite of the spooky books. And then of the not as spooky books, I really loved Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. For me, this was more like mystery adventure, but it was a very straightforward story. We follow our heroine and a Mayan god through several different cities in Mexico on a quest. And it was really interesting. I learned so much about Mayan mythology. I learned Mayan words that are incorporated throughout the story. I know a lot about Mexico, and I've actually been to quite a few of the places that they talk about in the book, but it was so much fun revisiting those areas and then getting to experience a couple new areas that I haven't actually had a chance to visit yet. I ultimately thought, like, the only reason that book didn't end up a 5-star for me was just because I felt like maybe at points it was a little too simplistic. Like, maybe the heroine and the Mayan god overcame some obstacles just a little too easily. But all in all, I loved it. I could have read another 300 pages of that book and been perfectly happy about it. So those would be my top reads for the month. And I think that's about it. That's pretty much it for the October wrap up. We've gone over genres, we've gone over starred ratings, favorites, least favorites, how many pages we've read. Unfortunately, I have no chill when it comes to buying books or getting books for my TBR. So my October TBR was like probably double what I could have actually accomplished in a month. So as you can see, I have a pretty large stack of books that I didn't make it to in October. But I am doing a no by November, and I may actually even do a no by December because I have a pretty significant stack of books throughout the house that need to be read. So these books will be completed in the next couple months. And those books that I did not make it to but am hoping to read soon were The Year of the Witching, Verity, Ill Will by Dan Chown, Ninth House, The Butterfly House, Certain Dark Things, All the Murmuring Bones, The Shadows, Horrid, A Lesson in Vengeance, The Death of Jane Lawrence, White Smoke, and The Inheritance of Orchidea Divina. I also have The Whisper Man. I'm not sure why it's not in this stack right now, but I have that somewhere here. So those are all of the horror books that I had purchased in anticipation of my horror month. I was a little overly ambitious. All of them sound like excellent books. The covers are so cool. So I'm hoping that I'm going to have a chance to read those, like I said, throughout November and December for my no buy months. If you've read any of these, let me know. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts were. Hype me up. Help me maintain this horror reading mood. All right, so that's the end of my October wrap up. We've covered the ratings, we've covered the genres, we've covered the books that I unfortunately was unable to finish this month. And I think going forward, all I really wanted to talk about is that in November, I am doing a no buy November month. I will be focusing on books that I already have in the house. So I will not be buying any books at all. I will not be going to any little free libraries to take books. I may go drop some off because I have a lot to get rid of, but I'm definitely not going to be taking any because I have more than enough to read. I will be doing a video pretty soon talking about the 15 books that are on my November must read. And yeah, the other thing that I'm going to try to focus on is I focused, like I said, on all dark, horror, suspense, that kind of stuff for October. So for November, I'm going to try and focus a little more on books that have like a deep emotional impact. I'm not going to stick to one specific genre, but I am going to try to stick to books that I know are supposed to kind of work on the feels. Some of them will be nonfiction, some of them will be fiction. Like I said, it'll be scattered across a bunch of different genres. Let me know what's on your November TBR. What are you most excited about? And let me know how you did on your October TBR. Are you like me where you're like way overly ambitious and you buy twice as many books as you need and end up only being able to finish like half? Or did you manage to finish everything that you had planned? Just definitely let me know in the comments below. And also, if you're interested in a little bit more about some of the horror books that I read in the month, I do a weekly series where I write a recipe based upon a food item mentioned in one of the books. So throughout the whole month of October, since we were doing horror, I focused on horror book recipes. So there is like 4 different recipe videos posted on different horror books that I read. Or that I read in October, and you can find a link up here. It should pop up in just a second. If you click that, it will take you to the playlist of all those horror recipes. And yeah, so that's it for now. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. A bit of feedback helps me really kind of determine what I should do more of. And if you're not already subscribed, please hit that subscribe and notification bell so you never miss a video. I do post every Tuesday and every Thursday very reliably. I have not missed a single day since I started my YouTube channel. Tuesdays are those book-based recipes, and Thursdays are videos like this where I'm just talking about what I'm reading, what I liked, book buying challenges, booktube tags, things like that. Thank you again for joining me tonight. My name is Caitlin Bandy, and this is Bandy's Books, and Gibson's over here having a nap already, so I'm probably going to join him. Bye.